Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're gonna look at AMD and the purchase of the new company called ZT Systems for almost $5 billion US. We know that the purchase will be done through a 75% cash payment and a 25% stock dilution. I think the dilution is less than 0.5%, so you shouldn't worry, it's not a whole lot. One of the main reasons that they bought the company, according to the CEO Lisa Su, is that the addition of ZT System engineers will allow AMD to more quickly test and roll out its AI GPUs at a scale that the cloud computing giants such as Microsoft require. We know that Microsoft is one of the main users of MI300 already, and they also obviously would satisfy the needs of the likes of, let's say, Google and Amazon and Meta and so on. So I think this is an interesting move, although one caveat though that they will in this purchase, once the purchase and acquisition is completed, next year sometime they will sell off part of the company, which kind of deals with the cooling solution for data center servers. And I think that is in order to not, agitate their one of their biggest customers, for example, Supermicro, SMCI, and also the likes of Dell and to some degree Lenovo, because they are already making, cooling solutions and complete package server solutions. And I don't think AMD wants to compete with their customers. So this could be in a smart move. We can see that the stock is kind of, it earlier today was up almost, actually more than 3.5% in the pre-market, but now it's up just 0.2%. But let's see how the market reacts. Hopefully it's gonna give enough energy to go over the 150, maybe even 116 sometime. But I think this dip here offered quite nice opportunity to buy the stock, and I still think this is highly valuable, which I will explain as you continue here. You can see that these are my estimations for AI GPU sales. Obviously, if you follow this channel, you know that Nvidia had a head start, quite a big head start. They sold $47 billion in AI GPUs last year, on their way to actually sell more than double than that in 2024, and most likely increase in 2025. For AMD, the number for last year was 500 million. We know that combined, according to the Q1 earnings report, they said that they managed to sell over 1 billion in MI300, so AI GPU sales, for Q1 this year and Q4 last year. So these two numbers, which I kind of written down here, kind of shows that. And for Q2, in the latest earnings a couple of weeks ago, she did mention that they sold over 1 billion already in Q2. So we could say that 1 billion in Q4 and Q1 of, and then another 1 billion in Q2. So we are already sold more than 2 billion of MI300s, which is still the fastest ramping AMD product of all time. Although those numbers pale in comparison to Nvidia, but for AMD, this is a nice, let's have a look at it here. You can see that if you look at the segments, AMD's data center segment is concluded with a GPU part and a CPU part. The GPU is called Instinct, the MI300 and so on. And the EPYC is the CPUs. Now you can see that EPYC sales usually hovers around, at least over the past 3 quarters, just under $2 billion. And the MI300 in less than 3 quarters is over 1 billion. And I project that they will reach roughly to 1.5 to 2 billion per quarter by end of this year or second half. We know that Lisa Su guided for $4.5 billion of sales of MI300 in this year. But I think that number is a bit conservative, so I'm hopeful of north of 5 billion. Hence why I kind of, had planned out this from 1.6 and 1.8 billion for Q3 and Q4. And I think as we go into next year, they will be even more competitive. We know that Nvidia now has some kind of manufacturing problems with B100. And I think that's going to be a bit delayed, which helps AMD essentially, as they are on schedule to launch MI325X with even higher memory capacity, which especially in inferencing will help AMD even more compared to Nvidia. So AMD already has quite a nice advantage, if I understand it correctly, in inferencing. And that advantage will increase as their 288 gigabyte MI325X will compete with H200 and H100 before Blackwell enter the market. But even when Blackwell enter the market, it still has less memory capacity than AMD's MI325X, and will only match what MI300, which already been on the market for 1 year, has been offering. So I'm quite optimistic about AMD, but also Nvidia. So again, I'm not talking down Nvidia at this moment. I think this is, it's just in this video is about AMD. Looking at the manufacturing capability, and in order to project where we can see the sales increase for AMD and also quickly Nvidia. So all depends on the amount of packaging capability and capacity that both companies receive from TSMC. We know that Nvidia kind of has the lion's share of TSMC's packaging capacity in terms of CoWoS, chip on wafer on substrate. Then we have Broadcom, and then for AMD we have the green bar and the other yellow ball, which is, the Xilinx component of the company. So I think AMD is, together with Marvell, the third biggest CoWoS consumer. And this is important, but you have to also remember that AMD is roughly, as I mentioned in this other here, that they are roughly 1 year behind Nvidia in terms of volume ramp. So you cannot expect the same kind of CoWoS capacity for AMD as you did with Nvidia. As you can see here, Nvidia is projected to have at least 14,000, which again, I think this number is fairly conservative. My newest estimations for TSMC packaging capacity is well over 32,000. Some sources are mentioning close to 50 to 60,000. But if we still stick with this, let's say, conservative number, you can see that Nvidia is projected to have more than around 15 times higher wafer allocation than AMD's AI solution component. Remember, when we looked at this graph from Semi-Analysis, amazing graph here, Nvidia's allocation is essentially going all to AI GPUs, but AMD's one, the green and the dark yellow one, is going to multiple different product lines. I think only the green one is essentially maybe going to their data center. So you could see that maybe my estimation is still a bit conservative for AMD. But yeah, I think, let's say a factor of 10x difference. And yeah, that's quite a bit, but I think, let's stick with 800 number here. So AMD should have around 800 wafers by end of this year. And we know that for each wafer, AMD is able to produce roughly 50 to 55 MI300s. So if you essentially take the 55 number, how many chips they can get per wafer, times the number of wafers they are allocated per month, we can see here that on the conservative side, we should have around 44,000 MI300 chips per month. And if we assume a 15,000 average selling price for each chip, should give us around 600 million, 700 million sales per month of MI300. Do I think this number is realistic? Well, I actually think so, because again, if we go back to the other numbers here, so you can see that I projected 1.8 billion of MI300 sales and MI325 combined by Q4. And I think, that's around essentially quite squarely 600 million per month. Is it possible? Well, they seem to, everything points to the fact that they have this kind of, allocation here. We can see that for the summer of this year, so essentially the months of, April, June, July, August, and so on, I was expecting 500 million or thereabouts of MI300 revenue, or 30,000 MI300s. And you can see that on in terms of sales, they managed to come in. I think they actually said that they already surpassed 1 billion of MI300 sales in Q2. That would be around 350 million. So if you assume any kind of increase in ramp, it would be possible to have this 500 million per month. Maybe it's a tad too high. It's difficult to say. Again, these numbers are not exact. I have no exact data on what sales prices are. You could essentially, let's say, I do suspect that the wafers per month allocated to MI300 maybe is now a bit on the conservative side. I could see even like 1,500 here. That would be over 1 billion monthly revenue. But maybe in that case, the average selling price is too high, 15,000. Maybe we could lower this to 10,000. So yeah, it depends on a lot of different nuances. But I think if you assume 600 to 800 million of sales by end of this year, is very realistic. And I do expect that this will definitely increase at some point next year to more than 1 billion per month. So that's the part about the data center. We also know that AMD's 5th gen EPIC lineup, so the CPU on the data center part, will launch. I think rumors are on 10th of October, and they will be very competitive with the Intel server CPUs. So again, I'm fully expecting AMD to do well there as well. And you can see that already we are almost at $3 billion in data center sales, almost. And if you add to, this is the Q2 number of 2,834 million. If you add another $500 million of MI300 sales there, you are already at 3.5 billion US dollar sales, assuming that Epic sales stays at the same level. But I do think that in the coming 12 to 18 months, the Epic sales will also increase quite substantially, because a lot of focus has been put on their GPUs upgrades on the data centers. But this offers, a possibility for all the companies to update their CPUs, which are now well over 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years old in terms of server general purpose CPUs. Not everything is AI, remember. A lot of different traditional workload, you still need your standard Google searches, or when you essentially go on Amazon, everything is not based on GPUs. So I think it opens the possibility for AMD to go well over 2.5 billion of Epic sales at some point next year per quarter. So where does that leaves us, in terms of the actual numbers? So well, let's have a look at this. You can see that these are the actuals of Q2. Now for Q3, they guided at 6.7 plus minus 300. So I went somewhere in between at 6.845. I think that embedded will still stay around, kind of weak-ish before it kind of starts to rebound late this year, early next year. So let's stay with this number there, 880. Now for the gaming, I still think it's gonna be, it's difficult to say, because in Q3 you should theoretically see a bit more than Q2, because we're getting close to the holiday season. But I just went with a more even lower number. But I think in Q4 it will go up again. But that doesn't really matter because it's such a small segment for the moment. Although I expect this segment has huge potentials. Going back just a few quarters ago, we can see that we were well over 1.5 billion for 4 or 5 quarters straight. So it's possible for this to rebound, especially when the gaming segment, the new GPUs arrive, and also the PlayStation 5 Pro. So I think but again, let's go with this number there. And then the client side, I mentioned in my previous videos, they will be really strong there with the new Strix Point. So yeah, I think AMD will have definitely a lot of sales there. But then, as I mentioned, adding another $500 million of MI300 sales, this would leave us, the data center around 2.5 billion. Again, within the guidance of 6.7 plus minus 300. I added another, let's say, 600 million of MI300 sales for Q4. Actually, if we go back to this other chart here, you can see that I kind of dialed it back only to 200 million. It depends, we could go with, let's say, if we go with another 500-600 million, we could still stick with let's say 2.3. So that would leave us at 5.6 billion. So that would require a beat of around 1 billion above what Lisa Su said in the last quarter. Maybe a bit optimistic, I don't know. But is it possible? Well, it depends. Again, in order to have 2.3 billion of MI300 sales for Q4, that would require around 700 to 800 million of sales of end of the year, which is essentially 100 to 150 million more than my estimations here. And we could reach that number already if in this calculation we increase this just to 1,000. There you go, with 1,000 of wafers, and it's not impossible. Again, you can see that semi-analysis has AMD to that green bar doesn't look like 10 times less, especially if you consider Q3. I don't know why they kind of estimate that they will go down on Q3, because on Q3 numbers they are maybe even 1/5 or 1/4 of it. So I don't know why they decreased it. Maybe they didn't have any visibility, or it could be possible that AMD is ramping up some other product that requires not CoWoS S but maybe CoWoS L, the big one. I don't know, it's difficult to say. But I think for me to increase this number from 800 wafers allocated to 1,000, I don't think it's highly unlikely. So it's possible that AMD comes in at 800 million monthly MI300 sales, which would translate to around 2.3 billion for Q4. and then total year of 5.6 billion. And then if you go to the, the earnings, that would represent again, Q4 of, let's say 4 billion of data center sales. At this point, that would be essentially well over 2 billion of MI300 and around 2 billion of EPYC. And what kind of earnings per share would we see there? Well, we could see that my estimation in that case would be 55% non-GAAP gross margin, which is 4.3 billion of gross profit. Operating expenses around 2.1, maybe let's say 2.2. So if we increase this, let's say to 2.2 billion, then we could have operating expenses due to operating income of 2.1 billion, net income of 1.8, and earnings per share $1.1. And that again, that's quite a nice number for a company that is, now trading. Let's see how the market reacted. So the company is trading right now at $150. So if you essentially assume the Q4 run rate of $1 times 1.1 times 4, that's almost $4.5. And you take 150 divided by 4.5. That's a PE ratio of 33. I think that's, on a non-GAAP basis. I think that's fairly realistic for a company that, again, just today announced a nice purchase of a new kind of segment to their capabilities. So again, sorry for extremely long video. I just think this was just, a bit update on AMD, and for you to see, my kind of estimations in terms of the possible earnings, and also how I arrived at those kind of sales numbers. Again, don't take these numbers for actuals. These are just rough estimates. Again, for all we know, the ASP could be completely much more higher, like 20,000, and Nvidia's could be lower, or vice versa. Or as I said, maybe the ASP is right, but maybe the COBOS allocation is quite substantially wrong. Because, for example, for Nvidia, if this could be, let's say 20,000, look at the difference. So 20,000 of Nvidia wafers per month. How many chips would that be? That would be 600, H100s per month. 15 billion H100s, which I don't know, like 15 billion H100 sales per month. That could be, it sounds a bit too high to me. But again, maybe if you, in this way, let's say you reduce this to, let's say you reduce the average selling price from 25 to 20,000. Now you get to 12 billion. Is it possible? I don't know. Like if you look at it here again, you can see that for Q4 for Nvidia, in order to have, I think it's difficult because they had 19.3 billion of data center sales. Remember, for Nvidia, this 19.3 billion is the compute part, and the networking is around 3 billion. So the combined data center is a bit higher, 22.5 billion. But is it possible for them to increase, from almost 20 billion data center AI GPUs to 36? Maybe a bit too difficult, but it's not impossible. So I don't know. I think that's gonna do it for today. Again, these numbers are, just take them with a grain of salt. It's just for you to have some understanding of what kind of sales we are talking about. So thank you for watching, and for tomorrow I will look at the NEO and update the last couple of weeks of delivery numbers. So I appreciate you for watching this video. Please like the video and subscribe, and see you in the next one.